Damn it, this can't be happening. Richard Donovan's voice was not a shout. It was a desperate, guttural roar that echoed off the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office on the 45th floor. It was the sound of a man watching his life's work, his family's legacy, teeter on the edge of a financial abyss. He was literally sweating through his $3,000 Brioni suit, the fine Italian wool clinging unpleasantly to his skin as he paced back and forth across the vast expanse of his office. The plush, custom-woven carpet did nothing to soften the harsh, rhythmic thud of his expensive leather shoes. Each step was a beat in a frantic, panicked drum solo. In exactly 45 minutes, a delegation of executives from Group Master, the French pharmaceutical and medical technology conglomerate, would arrive. This was not just a meeting. It was the most important meeting in the 50-year history of Donovan Industries. $100 million in medical technology contracts, a deal that would not only secure the company's future but launch it into the global stratosphere, depended on the presentation he was about to give, and the professional translator, the one he had booked months in advance, the one who was supposed to be the bridge between his American pragmatism and their French precision, had just called last-minute family emergency, a burst appendix, an apologetic but firm cancellation, Mr. Donovan. I've tried every single translation service in the city, his assistant, Jennifer, informed him, her voice trembling slightly. She was a model of efficiency, a woman who had navigated Richard's demanding, often volatile, temperament for over a decade, but now, even she looked pale, her usual composure frayed at the edges. I've called in every favor. It's the eve of a national holiday. There is simply no one available, not for a high-level corporate translation, not at this short notice. Richard stopped his frantic pacing and stared at her, his eyes wide with a dawning, sickening horror. No one, he repeated, the word a hollow echo in the cavernous office. French are inflexible, Jennifer continued, stating the brutal, well-known fact. Their policy is legendary, French only, no exceptions. They see it as a matter of cultural respect and professional seriousness. Richard loosened the knot of his silk tie, which suddenly felt like a hangman's noose. He could feel the crushing weight of 200 jobs, 200 families, pressing down on his shoulders. His family business, started by his grandfather, an immigrant with nothing but a dream and calloused hands, built over 3 decades by his father, and now entrusted to him, could collapse. It could all unravel, completely and utterly, if he lost this contract. The French delegation had already made it clear, through a series of terse formal emails, that they did not reschedule meetings. It was today, or it was never. Be someone, he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. He pounded his fist on the massive, polished surface of his mahogany desk, the sound a sharp, ugly crack in the tense silence. Someone in this entire godforsaken city who speaks fluent, professional French. Anyone. And then, from the hallway, just outside his office, a small, clear voice drifted in, a melody in a minor key against the harsh, discordant symphony of his panic. Dad, you forgot your wrench on the cart. Richard stopped abruptly, his fist still clenched on the desk. He turned his head. Through the half-open door of his office, he saw a young black girl, no older than 12, handing a heavy, greasy tool to Joseph Williams. Joseph was the building's head janitor, a quiet, dignified man who had worked at Donovan Industries for over 15 years, a silent, almost invisible fixture in the corporate landscape. The girl spoke to her father, and the words she used were not English. They were French, perfect, fluent, melodious French. She asked him if he needed help with the rest of the equipment, her tone a mixture of childish concern and a strange, adult-like competence. Richard stared, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. He turned to Jennifer, his eyes wide, his voice a hoarse, urgent whisper. Jennifer, did you hear that? Hear what, sir? She asked, her own attention still focused on the list of defunct translation agencies on her computer screen. That child, Richard whispered, pointing a trembling finger towards the hallway. She was speaking French. Jennifer followed. Her boss's gaze and a small, puzzled frown creased her forehead. Sir, that's just Amelia, Joseph's daughter. She must have come to pick up her father. I think her school let out early today for the holiday. Richard watched the girl, more closely now, his desperation latching onto this impossible, ridiculous sliver of hope. Amelia Williams wore a simple, neat school uniform, a navy blue jumper over a white blouse. Her sneakers were worn but clean. She carried a patched, well-loved backpack over one shoulder. At 12 years old, she looked completely, utterly, out of place in this sophisticated, high-powered corporate environment. She was a wildflower that had somehow managed to grow through a crack in the polished concrete. but there was something in her eyes, something that caught Richard's attention even from across the room. It was an intelligence, a quiet, self-possessed serenity that stood in dramatic, stark contrast to his own desperate, frantic agitation. When Amelia noticed that she was being watched by the company's powerful CEO, she did not look away or shy away. She offered him a small, polite wave and a smile. It was a smile of such genuine, unforced confidence that it seemed impossible for someone so young, for someone in her position. "Joseph," Richard called out, his voice impulsive, a drowning man grasping at a piece of driftwood. He stepped out of his office, his presence immediately filling the hallway with an aura of power and anxiety. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" The janitor approached, his movements nervous, his eyes downcast. He was clearly uncomfortable with this sudden, unprecedented attention from the man at the top of the corporate food chain. "Is there a problem, Mr. Donovan?" he asked, his voice soft, respectful. "Your daughter," Richard said, getting straight to the point, his voice still a low, urgent whisper. "Does she speak French?" Joseph blinked, his expression one of complete surprise. "Yes, sir," he said slowly. "Amelia, she's very intelligent. She sees she taught herself French on the internet and from books at the public library. She dreams of studying in France one day." Richard felt a tiny, irrational spark of hope ignite in the cold, dark cavern of his chest. "What level of French?" he pressed. "Is she fluent?" "Well," Joseph hesitated, looking over at his daughter with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "She talks to the French tourists who visit the museum where we do volunteer work on the weekends. They're always very impressed with her. They say she sounds like she's from Paris." Amelia, sensing that she was the center of this strange, intense conversation, approached them. She stood beside her father, a small, composed figure in the shadow of the powerful CEO. "You, Mr. Donovan?" she asked, her English as perfect as her French, but with a quiet, formal politeness that revealed a careful, thoughtful upbringing. Richard, in a move that surprised even himself, knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. His mind was racing, a chaotic whirlwind of desperation and disbelief. This was insane, utterly certifiably insane. This child, this janitor's daughter, could be his salvation, or she could be his final, public, humiliating ruin, betting the future of his entire company, his family's legacy, on a 12-year-old girl he had never even noticed before. Seemed like the act of a madman, but what other choice did he have? "Amelia," he said, his voice now low and serious, his eyes searching hers for some sign, any sign, of competence or fraud. "I need someone who speaks fluent, professional French, for a very, very important meeting. In 40 minutes. Would you feel comfortable helping me out?" Amelia's dark eyes, which had been so calm and serene just a moment before, now sparkled with a new light. It was a mixture of intense curiosity and a sudden, sharp, undeniable determination. "What kind of meeting?" she asked, her voice steady. "Are we talking about?" Richard took a deep breath, the air in the hallway feeling thick and heavy. "A very important business meeting," he repeated slowly, watching her, still torn between a sliver of hope and a mountain of skepticism. "It would be a simultaneous translation. For a group of French executives we'll be discussing $100 million contracts." Amelia nodded, her expression one of a seriousness so profound, so adult, that it was almost shocking. On her young face, "I understand perfectly, Mr. Donovan," she said, her voice clear and firm. "I can do it." "Joseph," her father interrupted, his voice a nervous, worried flutter. "Sir, with all due respect, Amelia is just a child. This might not be appropriate. It's too much pressure." "Papa," Amelia interrupted him, her voice soft, switching back to her flawless French. "Laisse-moi te montrer ce que je peux faire. Let me show you what I can do." Then, she turned her gaze back to Richard, her eyes clear and direct, her English once again perfect. "Mr. Donovan," she said, and there was a new, deeper note in her voice now, a note of personal history. "There's something you should know. I learned French because my late grandmother was from Haiti. She raised me, and she spoke only French to me until I was 6 years old, when she came to live with us." Richard felt a strange, unexpected tightness in his chest. The girl had lost her grandmother, just as he had lost his own beloved grandfather when he was around the same age. A flicker of human connection. But his business mind, his rationale, skeptical CEO brain, still resisted the sheer, unadulterated insanity of the idea. "Amelia," he said, his voice pleading, almost begging her to understand the magnitude of the situation. "This meeting, it's worth the future of this entire company. If something goes wrong, Then you've lost everything, she replied. Her logic as simple as it was devastatingly accurate. But if it goes right, you've gained everything. What is the real difference between trying with me or giving up completely? At that moment, Jennifer, his assistant, approached, her face pale, her phone in her hand. Mr. Donovan, she said, her voice a tense whisper, the French delegation has just confirmed. They'll be here in 35 minutes. And security just called from the lobby. There are reporters from the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal down there. They must have gotten wind of the meeting. If this fails, it will fail very, very publicly. Richard ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, feeling the weight of the world, the entire crushing weight of it, settling onto his shoulders. His family business, built by the sweat and dreams of his Italian immigrant grandfather, was now, quite literally, in the hands of a 12-year-old black girl, the daughter of his janitor. The irony was so cruel, so profound, that it was almost poetic. He had always prided himself on being a progressive employer, a man who believed in diversity and equal opportunity. He had given speeches about it. He had sat on panels. But now, in this moment of absolute, desperate need, when he really had to trust someone from outside his usual, comfortable, privileged circle, he could feel the ugly, insidious tendrils of his own unconscious prejudices rising up, choking him. Amelia, he said finally, his voice barely a whisper, a final, desperate plea. Do you understand that these men, they are extremely demanding? They are known for testing professional, adult translators until they break them. They will ask complex technical questions. They will try to trip you up. I know, she replied, her voice still impossibly, unnervingly calm. I've read about Group Marseille online. They are known for being difficult, but they are also known, she added, a small, knowing smile touching her lips, for respecting genuine competence. Richard blinked, stunned into a momentary silence. You researched them. When Dad told me that there was an important meeting with a French company today, I was curious, Amelia explained, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. So I did some research in the school library during my lunch break. She smiled that same, slightly enigmatic smile again. I learned that the CEO, Mr. Dubaci, lost his wife 2 years ago in a medical accident. An accident that could have been prevented with better, more advanced diagnostic technology. That's why he invests so heavily, so passionately, in medical innovation. It's not just business for him, it's personal. Joseph looked at his daughter, his face a mixture of immense pride and complete surprise. Even he, her own father, had not known that Amelia had done this. Mr. Donovan, Jennifer whispered, her voice now urgent, sharp with the ticking of the clock. A new message just came in from their driver. They're stuck in traffic on the interstate. They'll be here in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Richard felt the panic return, a cold, sickening wave. 20 minutes to turn a 12-year-old girl into a professional corporate translator, or 20 minutes to watch his entire world, his entire legacy, collapse in a spectacular, public inferno right in front of the most influential financial reporters in the country. Is there anything else I should know about you, Amelia? He asked, his voice desperate, grasping for any last sign, any final piece of evidence, that he was not, in fact, making the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of his entire career. Amelia hesitated for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in her dark eyes. She exchanged a quick, silent glance with her father, while she said slowly, I also speak German and Spanish, and I've been participating in the state debate competitions at my school. In French, I won 3 first-place trophies this year. Debate. Richard sat up straight, his attention suddenly laser-focused. What kind of debate? Discussions about business ethics, Amelia listed, as casually as if she were reciting her grocery list. Corporate social responsibility, the future of technological innovation, the role of globalism in modern society. She paused. My teacher says I have a knack for logical argumentation, and for presenting complex ideas in a clear and persuasive way. Richard stared at her, his mouth slightly agape. This was no ordinary child who happened to know a second language. This was a tiny, formidable intellectual, a prodigy who had, completely unwittingly, been preparing for this very moment for years. Joseph, Richard said, turning to the janitor, his voice now full of a new, dawning respect. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why didn't you ever tell me that your daughter was so exceptional? Joseph looked down at the polished floor, a faint flush of embarrassment on his cheeks. Mr. Donovan, he said, his voice quiet but firm. You've known my daughter has existed for years. You've seen her here, in this building, since she was a little girl. But you never asked about her. To you, sir, with all due respect, we're just part of the furniture. The remark, so simple and so true, cut Richard deeper than any corporate insult ever could. He realized, with a sickening lurch in his stomach, that it was true. He really did see Joseph as an invisible, functional part of his world, an efficient, reliable employee, but ultimately, an irrelevant one. He had never once, in 15 years, taken a genuine, human interest in his personal life, in his family, in his dreams. And now he was discovering that this humble, invisible man had raised an extraordinary, brilliant daughter right under his nose. "Mr. Donovan," Amelia said softly, her voice gentle but her gaze direct, "you're worried because I'm young, and because I'm black, aren't you?" The direct, incisive question left him completely, utterly speechless. How had this 12-year-old girl just dissected the very core of his deepest, most shameful fears with such surgical unerring accuracy? It's not that," he stammered, his face flushing with a shame so profound it was almost a physical pain. "It's okay," she interrupted him, her voice kind, without a trace of accusation. "I understand, perfectly. But do you know what the advantage of being underestimated is?" She paused, a small, wise smile playing on her lips. "You get to surprise everyone." As Richard struggled with the maelstrom of his own inner prejudices, with the relentless, unforgiving ticking of the clock, something in Amelia's calm, determined gaze began to awaken a feeling he hadn't felt in years. It was the same wild, reckless spark of daring his own grandfather must have felt, all those years ago, when he bet everything he had on a small fledgling company that no one else believed would ever work. 15 minutes, Mr. Donovan. Jennifer's voice, sharp with tension, sliced through the thick, anxious air of the hallway. She watched her boss, who was still standing as if paralyzed by indecision, his face a mask of conflict. "Security has just confirmed a French executive's car has just pulled into the parking garage." Richard's gaze snapped back to Amelia. She stood calmly beside her father, her posture relaxed, her expression serene, as if discussing contracts with formidable European executives was a routine, everyday part of her 12-year-old life. There was something about that very serenity that bothered him, that unnerved him. It was almost as if she had been waiting for an opportunity like this, for a very, very long time. "Amelia," he said, his voice still hesitant, still grappling with the sheer, monumental insanity of what he was about to do. "Do you really, truly, understand the magnitude of what we are discussing here? If something goes wrong, if you make a single mistake, 200 families could lose their jobs, right before Christmas." "I understand perfectly, Mr. Donovan," she replied, her maturity so disconcerting, so profound, that it was almost frightening. "But may I ask you a question?" She tilted her head, her gaze direct and unwavering. "Why are you more concerned with my age and my appearance than you are with my qualifications?" The question, so direct, so logical, so utterly unanswerable, left him speechless once again. Beside her, Joseph shifted uncomfortably, a silent, internal battle playing out on his face, immense pride in his daughter's courage, and a deep, paternal concern for her boldness. "Mr. Donovan," Jennifer interrupted, stepping closer, her voice a low, urgent whisper, "can I speak with you, privately?" Richard, grateful for the interruption, followed her a few steps down the hall, out of earshot of Joseph and Amelia. "Jennifer, this is crazy," he hissed, his voice a torrent of pent-up anxiety. "This is certifiably insane. We are betting everything, the entire company, on a child." "With all due respect, sir," Jennifer said, and she did something she had rarely, if ever, done in her 15 years of loyal employment. She interrupted him. "I grew up in the same neighborhood as Joseph and Amelia. I've known that family for years. And I am telling you, Amelia Williams is no ordinary child." Richard frowned, his surprise momentarily overriding his panic. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Jennifer said, her voice firm, her eyes looking directly into his, "that she won a full academic scholarship to Riverside Academy, the most competitive, most exclusive preparatory school in the entire state, at the age of 10. I mean that she competes in academic debate tournaments against high school students, 17 and 18-year-olds, and she wins regularly." Jennifer took a deep breath, her own voice now filled with a passionate conviction. "Mr. Donovan, Amelia Williams is a genius, a bona fide off-the-charts genius, and we are all wasting our time here, panicking, because she doesn't look like what we expect a genius to look like." Richard felt the weight of that revelation settle on him like a physical blow. Riverside Academy. It cost $40,000 a year. It had a 5-year waiting list. He had tried, and failed, to get his own underachieving son into that school, and this girl, this janitor's daughter, had won a full scholarship. At the age of 10, there's more, Jennifer continued, pressing her advantage, sensing that she was finally breaking through his wall of prejudice and fear. Amelia also speaks Mandarin and Arabic. She teaches French to new immigrants, on the weekends at the local church for free, voluntarily. 12 minutes, a junior assistant shouted from down the hallway, her voice shrill with panic. Richard turned and walked back to Amelia, who had listened to the entire, hushed, conversation without flinching, her expression unreadable. "Why didn't you ever mention any of this?" he asked, his voice now stripped of its earlier desperation, replaced by a new, dawning sense of awe. "Because you never asked," she replied, her answer as simple and as damning as her father's had been. "For all these years, you've greeted my father politely, you've smiled at me in the hallway, but you've never shown any real, genuine interest in getting to know us. To you, Mr. Donovan, we were just part of the scenery." The observation, a quiet echo of her father's words, cut deep. It was a painful, undeniable truth. Richard realized, with a shame so profound it made his stomach churn, that he had systematically, unconsciously, underestimated the people around him his entire life, based on nothing more than their job titles, their appearances, their social status. "Amelia," he said, and his voice had changed completely now. The panic was gone, the desperation was gone. In its place was a new, strange, and unfamiliar feeling: trust. "If I am entrusting this meeting to you, I need to know that you can handle the pressure. These executives, they are known for testing translators until they break. They ask trick questions. They change subjects abruptly. They use obscure, specific technical jargon." "I know," she replied, her calmness no longer unnerving, but reassuring. "I read about their tactics online. Mr. Dubasi, the CEO, he often asks trick questions about obscure European medical device regulations to test a translator's technical competence. And Mr. Russo, his second-in-command, he likes to use regional French idioms, slang from the south of France, to confuse and fluster American translators." Richard blinked, his mind reeling. You researched them individually during my lunch break at school today," she confirmed, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "I also studied Groupe Marseille's annual reports for the last 3 years, their recent acquisitions, and the technical specifications of the products they usually invest in." She smiled that small, wise smile again. "Papa always taught me that preparation is a form of respect." Joseph nodded proudly. "My daughter," he said, his voice now firm, his earlier nervousness gone, "never does anything halfway. Mr. Donovan, 10 minutes. The voice from the hallway echoed again, a relentless, ticking clock. Jennifer approached, holding a thick folder. "Mr. Donovan, I've had my team prepare executive summaries of our technology, in French, just in case. If Amelia can just manage the basic conversation, maybe she can read from these for the technical vocabulary." "May I see them?" Amelia interrupted, her voice polite but firm. Jennifer, surprised, handed her the documents. Amelia took them, her eyes scanning the pages with an impressive, almost frightening, speed. She flipped through the thick stack of papers, her eyes darting back and forth, absorbing information at a rate that seemed almost superhuman. After 2 minutes of intense, silent reading, she looked up. "There are a few terminology errors here," she said, her tone diplomatic, not critical. "On page 3, for example, intelligence artificial medical would be more accurately translated as systeme d'assistance, diagnostic par IAA. It's a more precise, more current term. And on page 5, the term you've used for predictive analysis is a little outdated. The current industry standard is analyze predictive avance." Jennifer and Richard exchanged a look of utter, profound, incredulous disbelief. A 12-year-old girl was correcting the technical translation documents that had been prepared, at great expense, by a team of professional corporate translators. How do you know that?" Richard asked, his voice now a whisper of pure, unadulterated admiration. "My grandmother," Amelia explained, a fond, sad smile touching her lips. "She worked as a nurse in a hospital in Port-au-Prince before she came to the United States. She taught me a lot about medical terminology. In French." She paused, her eyes shining with the memory. "She always used to say that the right words can save lives, so it was very, very important to know them perfectly." 8 minutes, Richard made a decision. It was a decision that would not only change his life, but the entire future of his company. Amelia, he said, his voice now firm, decisive, you're hired. But I need you to understand one thing. When we walk into that room, if these men sense any weakness, any hesitation, they will exploit it. Mercilessly. It's not personal. It's just French business. I understand, Mr. Donovan, she replied, with that same disconcerting, beautiful serenity. But may I give you a piece of advice? Of course, he said, humbled. Stop worrying about what they will think of me, she said, her gaze direct and clear, and start focusing on why your technology can save lives. Because genuine passion, that is a universal language. As they walked towards the main conference room, the three of them, the CEO, the assistant, and the janitor's daughter Richard, noticed something extraordinary happening. Amelia's calm, centered presence was infectious. It was transforming his own frantic, chaotic anxiety into a new, focused determination. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about all the things that could go wrong. He was thinking about what could go right. Mr. Donovan, Amelia said softly, as they approached the heavy oak doors of the conference room, there's one more thing you need to know about this meeting. Something that could completely change how you approach these executives. Richard stopped abruptly, his hand on the door handle. What do you mean? 5 minutes? Amelia's eyes shone with a confidence that seemed impossible for her age. It was as if she knew something, a final secret piece of the puzzle, that would turn this desperate high-stakes meeting into something else entirely, something that no adult in his entire company had ever considered, but that a brilliant, observant young girl had discovered in her secret. Lunchtime research on the two most powerful men in the French medical industry. Mr. Donovan, Amelia, said calmly, as they stepped into the vast, empty conference room, the city skyline sprawling out behind the plate-glass windows. Mr. Dubachi, the CEO, he lost his 12-year-old daughter in a medical accident 2 years ago. Her name was Amelia, just like me. But in French, Richard stopped, his heart lurching in his chest. How did you know that? I researched beyond the business reports, she explained simply. I read the obituaries, the newspaper articles from that time, the personal interviews he gave afterwards. She adjusted the strap of her worn school backpack. Mr. Dubachi doesn't just invest in medical technology, Mr. Donovan. He is seeking redemption. He wants to save other people's children, because he couldn't save his own. 3 minutes. Richard felt something fundamental, something tectonic, shifting in his perspective. He was no longer looking at a child who was trying to help a desperate adult. He was looking at a young, brilliant strategist who had prepared for this meeting more thoroughly, more intelligently, and more humanly than he ever could have. The elevator doors at the end of the hall opened with a soft, musical chime that echoed in the silent office like the bell of destiny. Mr. Felipe Dubachi emerged first. He was a distinguished, handsome man of 62, with a full head of perfectly combed gray hair, wearing a dark gray suit that probably cost more than Joseph's annual salary. At his side, Mr. Laurent Rousseau, younger but equally imposing, carried an expensive Italian leather briefcase and wore the bored, skeptical expression of a man who was thoroughly accustomed to being disappointed by ill-prepared, unsophisticated Americans. Richard took a deep breath and started to walk towards them, his hand outstretched, his mind racing to remember the formal French greeting Jennifer had drilled into him. Gentlemen, he began, welcome to Donovan Industries. I am, bonjour, messieurs, Dubachi, E.T. Rousseau, a soft, clear voice interrupted. Amelia stepped forward, her movements so smooth, so natural, so full of the quiet confidence of an experienced diplomat, that it took Richard's breath away. Je suis Amélie Williams, etc. Serai votre interprète aujourd'hui j'espère que votre volume de Paris s'est bien passe et que vous avez pu vous reposer un peu malgré la décalage. Good morning, Masters Dubachi and Rousseau. I am Amelie Williams, and I will be your interpreter today. I hope your flight from Paris was good, and that you were able to rest a little. Despite the jet lag. The silence that followed was absolute, profound. The two powerful French executives were completely, utterly paralyzed, their carefully composed, professional expressions melting away, replaced by a look of utter, stunned amazement. It was not just because of the girl's perfect, unaccented fluency. It was because of the diplomatic elegance of her presentation, the genuine human concern she had shown for their well-being. Mon Dieu, Mr. Dubachi whispered, his voice thick with an unexpected emotion, his eyes suddenly filling with tears. My God, votre accent, il est parfait. "Oh, vous appris à parler comme que your accent. It's perfect. Where did you learn to speak like that?" Amelia smiled, a gentle, compassionate smile. "Ma grand-mère était de Haiti, monsieur," she explained. "My grandmother was from Haiti, sir. Elle m'a élevé en n'y parlant que la français, jusqu'à l'âge de 6 ans. Elle disait toujours que la français était la langue du cœur. She raised me speaking only French until I was 6 years old. She always said that French was the language of the heart." Richard watched, fascinated, as something extraordinary, something miraculous, happened. Mr. Dubachi, the powerful, formidable CEO of one of the largest corporations in Europe, slowly, gracefully, knelt down on the expensive marble floor until he was at eye level with Amelia. His strong, manicured hands were trembling slightly. "Comment, vous appelez-vous, mon enfant?" he asked, his voice a raw, emotional whisper. "What is your name, my child?" "Amélie, monsieur," she replied softly. "Comme votre fille, Amélie, sir." "Like your daughter." The world, for a long breathless moment, seemed to stop. Mr. Dubachi closed his eyes, his face a mask of profound, heart-wrenching pain, and took a deep, shuddering breath. When he opened them again, there was a raw, vulnerable humanity in his gaze that Richard had never expected to see in such a powerful, formidable executive. "Mr. Donovan," Mr. Dubachi said, his voice heavy with an emotion that transcended language. Switching to a heavily accented but clear English, "In my 25 years of international business, I have never ever met a translator so young, and so well prepared, but there is something much more important happening here than business." Mr. Russo, his own eyes now glistening with unshed tears, nodded in agreement. "This child," he said, his voice full of a new, profound respect, "has treated us with more dignity, with more care, in 2 minutes, than many adults show us in entire meetings." Richard felt his entire worldview, his entire understanding of power, of business, of human connection, shatter into a million pieces, and then slowly, miraculously, begin to rebuild itself into something new, something better. For the next 40 minutes, as Amelia translated every complex, technical nuance of Richard's presentation with a surgical, effortless precision, he watched a transformation that he would never, ever forget. It wasn't just a translation. Amelia was a conduit. She was able to capture not just the words, but the emotions behind the words, the unspoken fears, the hidden hopes. When Mr. Dubachi asked complex, probing questions about the ethics of artificial intelligence in medical diagnostics, she didn't just translate the words. She contextualized the question, she explained the subtext, she humanized the technology. "Mr. Dubachi is asking," Amelia translated softly, her own voice laden with a genuine, palpable compassion, "if our technology can prevent the kind of diagnostic errors that took his daughter away from him." And that's when Richard realized that he wasn't just watching a business meeting. He was witnessing a session of profound, unexpected emotional healing, conducted by a 12-year-old girl who understood pain and loss and the desperate human need for hope in a way that most privileged, insulated adults could never, ever comprehend. "Our technology," Richard replied, looking not at his presentation screen, but directly into Mr. Dubachi's eyes, "exists for one reason. To ensure that no other parent ever has to go through what you went through." Amelia translated his words, her French soft and lyrical, but then, she added something of her own, a quiet, inspired, grace note. "Et pour vous promettre, monsieur," she said, her voice full of a profound, gentle conviction, "que chaque fois que cette technologie s'avérera un enfant, votre Amélie vivra à travers cet acte d'amour, and I can promise you, sir, that every time this technology saves a child, your Amelie will live on through that act of love." Mr. Dubachi broke down. He sobbed, openly, without shame. This powerful man, this titan of industry who controlled $100 million budgets, was crying in a conference room on the 45th floor of a building in a city thousands of miles from his home, because a small, quiet child had found the words, the perfect, healing words, that his expensive, world-class therapists had never been able to offer him. "Mr. Donovan," Mr. Dubachi said finally, wiping his eyes with a silk handkerchief, his voice thick with emotion but firm with a new resolve. "We are not going to invest just the $100 million we discussed." Richard felt his heart begin to race, a wild, joyful, disbelieving tattoo against his ribs. "We will invest $200 million, Mr. Dubachi declared, and," he added, looking at Amelia with an expression of profound, paternal love, "we want Amelia to be our official ambassador for this project, in Europe, and around the world. Mr. Russo nodded vigorously in agreement. This child, he said, understands the true purpose of medical technology in a way that most adult executives take years, if not a lifetime, to learn. Richard looked at Amelia, who remained calmly seated in her chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap, as if securing the largest, most important investment in the company's history was just another part of her school day. There is one more condition, Mr. Dubachi continued, his gaze still fixed on Amelia. We want to establish a comprehensive educational fund for Amelia University, a full exchange program in France, postgraduate studies, everything will be paid. For a talent like this, a heart like this, should never be limited by financial circumstances. Joseph, who had been watching the entire surreal scene unfold from a chair in the corner of the room, in absolute stunned silence, finally spoke. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice choked with an emotion so profound it was almost painful. I don't know what to say. Papa," Amelia said softly, switching back to her gentle, perfect English. "Remember how Mama always used to say that God puts special people in our path, at exactly the right moments. I think today we have all been those special people, for each other." As the contracts were being signed, as champagne was being served, as the two powerful French executives were treating Amelia not as a child, but as an honored, respected colleague, Richard realized something that would keep him awake for many nights to come. For years he had walked down the hallways of his own building, ignoring Joseph and Amelia, seeing them as nothing more than invisible, functional parts of the corporate landscape. He had never imagined, in his wildest, most arrogant dreams, that he was walking past the very person who would one day save his company, his legacy, and his own soul. At the end of the meeting, as the Frenchmen were saying their goodbyes, with warm, heartfelt hugs for Amelia, Mr. Dubachi whispered to Richard, his voice full of a new, profound respect. "Sir, you did not just hire a translator today. You discovered a treasure that was hidden right in front of your eyes, all along. But the biggest revelation, the most profound transformation, was yet to come. Because while everyone in that room celebrated the unexpected, miraculous success of the day, something in Amelia's bright, intelligent eyes suggested that this meeting was not an ending. It was just the beginning of an even bigger, more extraordinary story. A story that would show the whole world the terrible, tragic price of underestimating people, based on nothing more than the shallow, foolish, and ultimately meaningless judgment of appearances. 6 months later, the transformation at Donovan Industries was not just a matter of profit margins and stock prices. It was a visible, palpable change in the very atmosphere of the building. The first thing anyone saw when they entered the gleaming, renovated lobby was a large, beautifully framed portrait. It was of Amelia Williams, now 13 years old, smiling a serene, confident smile. She was the youngest corporate ambassador in American history. Next to the portrait, a gold plaque was inscribed with the company's new motto, "Innovation and Inclusion, recognizing talent where we least expect it." From his office window, Richard watched as Amelia, dressed in a simple but elegant business suit that had been tailored just for her, led a tour for a group of Japanese executives. They were interested in expanding the new medical technology project to Asia. Her fluency in Japanese, a skill she had revealed only the week before, had so impressed the visitors that they had already indicated their intention to double their initial investment proposal. "It's surreal, isn't it?" Jennifer commented, approaching his desk with the latest quarterly reports. She was no longer just his assistant. Richard had promoted her to vice president of communications, recognizing the sharp, compassionate intelligence he had for so long taken for granted. "The company has grown 400% since that meeting. Amelia has become a case study at Harvard Business School, at MIT, at Stanford. They're calling it the Amelia effect." Richard nodded, still struggling, at times, to process the sheer speed and scale of the revolution that a single child had brought about in his life and in his company. He had spent decades clinging to a rigid, outdated model of success, and a 12-year-old girl had demolished it in a single afternoon. That the intercom on his desk buzzed. "Mr. Donovan," Amelia's clear, calm voice echoed through the speaker. "The executives from Toyota Medical would like to discuss the implementation of the technology in their new hospital network in Tokyo. Can I schedule that for tomorrow morning?" "Of course, Amelia," he replied, a smile touching his lips. "And, thank you." The entire routine of the company had changed. Joseph Williams was no longer the invisible janitor. Richard, after a long, difficult, and deeply humbling conversation, had promoted him to operations supervisor for the entire building. He had finally recognized that the man who had so successfully, so lovingly, raised an extraordinary daughter, possessed innate leadership skills and a quiet wisdom that had been systematically ignored for 15 years. Dad always said that people only see what they want to see, Amelia had explained during a widely publicized interview on the country's most watched morning show. But when you stop judging people by their labels, and you start listening with your heart, you discover the most incredible talents in the most unexpected places. The program had generated millions of views, turning Amelia into a global symbol of how much human potential is wasted when we limit our vision with the blinders of prejudice. Richard recalled the phone call he had received from Mr. Dubachi just the week before. Mr. Donovan, the Frenchman, had said, his voice thick with emotion, "Our hospital in Lyon has saved 120 children in the last 3 months, using your technology." 120, Amelia, my Amelia. She taught us that investing in people, truly seeing them, means investing in miracles. Even more impressive, and more humbling, was how Amelia remained completely, utterly unchanged by her newfound fame and success. Every day, after her duties as a corporate ambassador were finished, she would return home to the same modest neighborhood, she would help her father with the housework, and she would continue to teach French to new immigrants at the local church on the weekends. Money is just a tool, she had explained to a reporter from Forbes, who had wanted to understand how a teenager was managing a $2 million educational fund. If you don't use a tool to build something good for other people, then the tool itself is useless. The interview had gone viral, inspiring hundreds of other American companies to reevaluate their own hiring practices, to start looking for talent within their own organizations, in the mailrooms, on the factory floors, in the janitorial closets. That afternoon, Richard received an unexpected visitor. Charles Hampton, the powerful, arrogant CEO of their chief rival, Morrison Corp., was waiting nervously in the lobby. Hampton, a man Richard had known and disliked for years, had lost 3 major contracts to Donovan Industries in the last 3 months alone. All of them negotiated directly by Amelia, Richard, Hampton said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued, his usual bluster gone. He was clearly, deeply uncomfortable. "I have to admit, I completely underestimated what you've built here. My company, we've been losing talent for years. Because we've been focused only on the Ivy League pedigrees, on the right appearances, on the people who look and sound just like us." Richard smiled, a genuine, compassionate smile, remembering how he himself had thought that very same way, just 6 short months ago. "Charles," he said, "what I've discovered is that true talent, real genius, it grows everywhere. We just need to learn how to see it. We need to stop looking only in the places we've always looked before." Hampton sighed, a sound of profound, weary defeat. "I'd like to propose a partnership," he said. "We want Amelia to help us, to review our hiring processes, our talent identification programs. We're willing to pay whatever it takes." "I'll ask her," Richard replied, knowing full well what her answer would be. "But knowing Amelia, she'll probably want you to invest that money in educational programs for underserved communities." And that is exactly what happened. Amelia agreed to consult for Morrison Corp., but only on the condition that they create a $5 million scholarship fund for young people from inner-city communities, to give them the same kinds of opportunities that she had been given. "Everyone has an incredible story inside them," she explained to a humbled Charles Hampton during their first meeting. "The only difference is, who gets the opportunity to tell that story, and who gets the opportunity to be heard." 6 months after that life-changing meeting, as Richard watched Amelia, his company's ambassador, his personal mentor, explain advanced concepts of artificial intelligence to a group of executives from around the world, he realized that he had learned the most valuable, most profound lesson of his entire career. True success, he now understood, doesn't come from finding people who are just like us. It comes from having the courage and the humility to recognize greatness in the places we never, ever thought to look. Joseph appeared at the door of his office, now wearing his new supervisor's uniform with a quiet, easy dignity. "Mr. Donovan," he said, "Amelia asked me to remind you about the meeting with the Chinese investors at 3 o'clock. She has already reviewed all of the technical documents in Mandarin, of course." Richard shook his head, a soft, wondrous laugh escaping his lips. "Joseph," he said, "can I ask you a question? How did you do it? How did you raise such an extraordinary, wonderful daughter?" Joseph smiled, a proud, loving, fatherly smile. "Mr. Donovan," he said, Amelia has always been this way. The only difference is that now someone is finally paying attention. As he watched Amelia lead yet another meeting that would generate millions of dollars in contracts and, more importantly, save countless lives, Richard realized that that desperate, panicked meeting 6 months ago hadn't just saved his company, it had saved him. It had saved his ability to truly, deeply, see the incredible, wonderful, extraordinary people all around him. And the best part, he knew, was that Amelia Williams was just getting started. At 13 years old, she was already making plans to start her own corporate inclusion consulting firm, with a simple, powerful mission to help other companies discover the priceless, hidden treasures that were standing right in front of them. The ones they just hadn't learned to see yet.